Hello? I am Ray, and do you need Jesus to get to God? That is what they say, is it not? No one comes to the Father except through me. Not me specifically, but Jesus. Or so they say. Finally, we will get some clarity on what most people have no idea about. You see, I started reading a book by Paramahansa Yogananda, and it's called The Second Coming of Christ. And he said something so wonderful. He said, in my own words, basically, it's very difficult to understand what Jesus was talking about from a normal person's perspective. But Yogananda, tapping into the same Christ consciousness as Jesus, is able to communicate the message of Jesus. So I hope little old me can do a little bit of this today. Clear things up. I may not be as enlightened as Yogananda, but we'll do our best. First things first. The way we judge the world is a confession of character. Meaning that, well, reality is being filtered through us, through our mind, and so whatever information you got going on here, it's going to be projected out onto the world, and that is what we will experience. So, what happens is that because we live as a person, we live identified with the ego. We think that other people are the same, and they're not, especially not someone like Jesus. And this is where people get messed up, because they mistake Jesus the man for Christ the God, because they live from ego. So they project that ego onto Jesus, that he is the one that will lead us to salvation. No, Jesus was the vehicle to Christ. Christ is the Son. Christ is the doorway to the kingdom of heaven. Don't get so caught up in the messenger. Listen to the message. There are many vehicles to God, not just one. But this is the one message that all spiritual teachers speak about. So, if you're all about Jesus, but then you hate the Buddha, you're being a hypocrite, because Jesus was Christ made man, and the Buddha was man made Christ. It's the same one Christ in both. It's the same one Christ in every spiritual master, and in you, and in me. You see, Jesus had authority in Christ, so he could confidently say, "Follow me," because he was not worried about his ego getting in the way. Now, the thing is, in order to have a personal relationship with God, G-O-D, the original OG, it's important to have a vehicle, to have a deity, to have a personified God. Because otherwise, well, God is just a vague idea, and it's hard to have a relationship with a vague idea. This is what I've kind of realized with the New Age movement. Sure, you can have a relationship with the universe, but in order to have a deep relationship with God, it's got to be personal. And so if it's not personal, it's hard to really connect with God. Not impossible. I do it. But just something to be aware of. So, it is a very good thing to worship a deity like Jesus. But don't mistake. All deities lead to the same one pointing. Don't get caught up in the vehicle. Because what do people do? They fight over religion. My religion is right and yours is wrong. This is the only way, and if you don't do it this way, hell for you. You get the swords. And well, I guess 90% of everybody else is just screwed. And everybody who came before Jesus was also screwed. And all the aliens on all the other planets and the trillions of planets were also screwed. We have to begin thinking rationally, because the ego does not want to. Why is this? It's because the frameworks in which we live our life, these beliefs, they give us a false sense of safety. The mind, the ego, hates the unknown. It doesn't like not to know. And so what it will do, it will fill the void with anything, even if it's stupid, even if it's nonsense, just for the false satisfaction of getting to think, at least I know. And our ego will always keep us from the truth. And what is God if not the ultimate truth? So people get so closed-minded about the religious beliefs, and that is precisely what keeps them from God. And they don't even realize it. As Jesus once told the parable of the sower and the seeds. One day a farmer guy was throwing seeds everywhere. And some seeds landed on the road, and they were eaten by birds. Some seeds landed in the weeds, and they were smothered out. Not good. Some seeds landed in the rocks, and they could not take root. And only a few seeds fell on fertile ground. What does this mean? You can think about it in terms of your heart or mind receiving the seed of God, receiving God's wisdom, or just God in general. Jesus tells you how to receive God and what not to do. So, there are people whose minds and their hearts, they're hardened. They are not open to God because they're closed off, they're closed-minded. And think about how many religious people fall into that category. Aren't they going to have quite a surprise? The weeds. This is the mind and the heart that is polluted with worldliness, with desires and avoidance. Toxic environment. So God's wisdom cannot cut through the smog in your brain. The rocks, the surface dwellers, those who go to church on Sundays but then are uptight pricks every other day, pretending to wear the mask of morality and virtue. They don't want real responsibility, real power. They just want the illusion of it. They just want to look nice. But the fertile ground, you could say, it's just the opposite of this. An open heart, an open mind, a clean mind and a clean heart, not full of resentment and negative thoughts. And those who have the desire for wisdom, who seek the truth. Because unless you seek, you will not find. And so, well, if you can't hear my words and you immediately get triggered, no, this cannot be. Well, you might be what Jesus was talking about. Probably this one. This is why people get triggered, right? It's because that little box that I showed you earlier, that's a safety box. And, well, you don't know a human being until you mess with their survival. We're like 3 days away from eating each other. And you have no idea what people are capable of. When pushed into survival mode, that is when you really remember, oh, we're just apes. We're just monkeys. Pretending to be civilized. It's a tight, very thin line between absolute destruction and chaos and maintaining your composure. Because most people suppress this animal within. But it's coming back. You see, we have to realize that different religions have different target audiences. Even though I use a lot of Christian ideas, my target audience isn't really Christian or any kind of religion. In fact, you could say it is for the spiritual rebels, those who don't fit in, those who don't want to stay stuck in a little box and look at life through a keyhole where everything is dark but you just see a little bit. You want to be able to see the truth as it is, see reality. And in order to see reality clearly, you must be free from attachments, which means attachments to beliefs that create a false sense of safety. Because think about it. Would you build the foundation of your life on sand or mud or that which is always changing? Or would you build the foundation of your life on that which is unchanging? A nice rock, solid ground. And you would say, well, obviously, the rock. I like the rock. Dwayne. Build your life on Dwayne. and everything will be okay. But most people build the foundation of their lives on beliefs. And all it takes for your beliefs to change is one little piece of information to completely destroy everything you believe to be true. So everybody, almost, is setting themselves up for disaster. That is the consequences of being attached to ego. Because the truth is eternal, and it's going to come to light. And if you're attached to ignorance, to darkness, you're going to be burned up. It's like when people talk about betrayal. Think about Judas and Jesus. Jesus was not actually betrayed by Judas. But because we live from our ego, that's what we think. Because we take things personally. Oh, this person did this thing to me, and so I'm going to do something to them. That's ego. But Jesus was not betrayed by Judas because he already knew that it was going to happen. But the difference with normies is that we're attached to our ignorance. We're attached to our illusions. And so when you say somebody betrayed you, it's not true. You just had an imaginary, made-up idea of who that person was. The person was always who they were. You just didn't know it. And then one day, when their true self emerged, you felt betrayed, not by the other person, but by your own imaginary image, by your own thoughts. I like to say that hell is the truth when you've been living a lie. But Jesus was under no illusion because he was the light. So he had absolute clarity of the truth. Let's use an example of a mirror. Two mirrors. This is the Jesus mirror. This is you, probably. You see, what happens is that we have all this conditioning, all these attachments to identities and beliefs and things like that. And what this manifests as is dirt on the mirror. It's a distorted image of ourselves. And we look in the mirror and see this distorted image, and we begin to believe that is us. But with someone like Jesus, they become empty. The mirror is clear. And who is reflecting back? The Christ. That is all. The Christ is also in you. It's just covered up by the dirt. And you see, most people, if Jesus returned and started talking about the same things, they would crucify him again, probably harder. Because it was the same ignorance 2,000 years ago as the same ignorance now. Jesus was telling you that you are God, not to create a middleman between you and God. Nope, if you want to get to God, you got to pay the fee. Nobody gets past without the fee. But Jesus was wise. So he knew that people would not understand this. So he wasn't so obvious about it like I am. So he hid the message in parables and in things that made you think. Because when the truth just comes out, most people aren't ready to hear it. The reason that one does not realize that they are God is because of the dirt. You spent so long looking at yourself in this distorted image that you believe that's who you are. And that distorted image is ego. The ego is like a big dark cloud that covers up the light and the warmth of the sun, your true nature. So the more you're attached to ego, the further you're separated from God. There is something called the Christ path. It's one of the pathways to God. How does it work? It's the path of selfless service. Because the ego is selfishness. So when you're unconditionally selfless, when you express unconditional love to all beings, there is no self. And when there is no self, when you become nobody, when you become the void, what is left? The light. It's simply about being empty, being free from attachments and mind garbage. When you only think about others, you don't think about yourself. And with no self comes no mind. And with no mind, there is no resistance from God to the world, from source through you. And so because we believe ourselves to be the mind, the ego, I like to say, The more there is of you, the less there is of God. Christ. And the less there is of you, the more there is of God. You all have the ability to be like Jesus. He was just a master. And I don't mean be like him personally. I mean you have the power to become the Christ. And this is the pathway forward. It's the same thing that he taught. It really comes down to two things. How to get to heaven in 15 seconds or less. Wow, I should be charging for this one. 1. You purify the mind. You stop thinking thoughts that disturb you. You stop judging others. You stop judging yourself. You stop judging life. Because your thoughts are what disturb your peace. Nothing else. It's your reactions to your experiences that are causing all the trouble. And then 2, pure in heart. Love everybody. Love your enemies. Because when you love your enemies, you have no enemies. When you give love to all, you heal the world. And this is why Jesus said, unless you come to me as little children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Because you must be pure in heart and pure in mind. You must be free from all of these attachments, all of this conditioning. And basically all religions tell you this in a million different ways for different target audiences. And then what happens is that the ego gets a hold of these teachings and just uses it for its own benefit. And this is why religion destroys people's lives. It's because people use religion for their own power, to manipulate others, for their own selfish gain. Think for a moment of a wall. And on the wall there's a screen. And here is a little projector casting light upon the screen. And on the screen is reality as we know it. But because we live as a person, there's a person-shaped shadow standing in front of the screen. And that shadow is projected onto the world. That is why we don't see reality as it is. We see reality as we are, through this little keyhole. But when you begin dissolving the self, the false self, back to the void for you, you realize that you are the light. We're all the same one light. That is what Jesus was saying. Not that you have to come to the light through me. No, find the light within yourself. And also, if you can't find the light, then practice devotion. And that is why, for instance, worshiping Jesus is a powerful thing. Because sometimes we're not strong enough to discover the truth by ourselves. So we need somebody to help us out. So it doesn't matter what vehicle you use to get to God. Don't get distracted. Because people will argue about their vehicle. Oh, look at my tires, they're better. I get better gas mileage than your vehicle. Look at my engine, pristine. And they'd spend all their time arguing about the vehicle when the whole point is to get you to the destination. Focus on the destination. Everything else is a distraction. It is better to just go pray in a dark room and don't talk to anybody. Because God is beyond words. God is beyond thoughts. So the more you speak about God and think about God, although this can be a great thing, you have to remember the point. Be with God. Become one with God. Or should I say, remember, you're already oneness. And see, that is his whole life's journey. We're born into ignorance. We forget. We forget our true nature. We forget our power. We fall into darkness. And then what happens? What is awakening? We remember. That is all. This journey is just a process of remembering. Forgetting and remembering. Forgetting and remembering. You get caught in the ego and the illusion, and then you remember your true nature. And there just becomes more and more subtle versions of this. For instance, the spiritual ego might come along and say, yes, I'm enlightened. But you're still trapped in ego. Now you're just forgetting again. Because people who are enlightened don't talk about it, really. Remember that the ego is a sense of self. So the more you're talking about yourself, the stronger your ego is. That's how you can tell someone who's not really enlightened or awakened. I'm enlightened, I'm awakened. I had this, I did this. You can watch the Exposing the Dark Side of Spirituality video. Great example. Spiritual ego. And this is what will happen, because you might do some psychedelics and have a spiritual awakening. Wow, I'm one with everything. But then you come back to earth and the ego puts itself together again, and you still think it's you. And you try to take that divine wisdom and act as though it's still true for you. But with things like psychedelics or just fleeting temporary experiences, you don't earn the wisdom, so it's not usable. So oftentimes knowledge makes things worse because the ego likes to think it knows something. But if the teaching doesn't help you practically in your life, then what purpose of it is it of? It's just a waste of time. It's just a distraction, just keeping you lost. And the thing is, we might think, oh, well, it's the ego that is the enemy. It's the devil keeping us from God. Kind of. Don't fall in the trap of fighting the ego, because that's just the ego trying to get rid of itself, and it won't want to do that. It pretends to get rid of itself. So you feel like you're being spiritual. All you have to do is remember the light. Remember the message of Jesus and all the other spiritual masters and all the other deities. They're all pointing to the same one thing. All rivers lead back to the same one ocean, my friend. Don't get so caught up on what path you're taking. Everybody's path is unique to them. You might find God in your own way, and nobody else can tell you this is the only way. Everything you need is already within you. Seek God and you will find. I am Ray. Visit my cool store. And if you want to save years wandering aimlessly on your spiritual journey, come talk to me. And I'll help you get the clarity you need, my friend. And if you like, join our free community. Much peace and many blessings. And remember, just be like Jesus.